You are listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So, if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
I've been reading your book.
Oh, wonderful.
The Unsightly Truth of Laser Vision Correction. LASIK surgery makes healthy eyes sick.
Correct.
There's several points in the book where it talks about people who've had the surgery and have been crippled with complications afterwards and pain and have taken their lives. I think at least 30, I remember. And I remember reading at the time, Cynthia, going, wow, that's pretty drastic. But what you don't know is, since our last little chat, I've had a C6 nerve disc prolapse. And it's been agony. And now, after almost like a 4 or 5 week break, I'm back into doing podcasts. You're being one of the first one. And I can tell you right now, I can relate to those people because I was thinking if this pain goes on for 6 months, I don't know if I can carry on any longer. It's bad. Like, it eats you up. And I was thinking about the pain in my neck, right? I will let you talk, Cynthia, I promise. But I was thinking about the pain in my neck. And I was thinking, I can't find any position of comfort. And then there was literally just one position. If I tilt my head left and lie on a pillow in a certain way, I could just get comfortable. Still would wake up 4 or 5 times in the night. But I was thinking, if this pain is in your eyes, constantly burning, whether you look or close your eyes, day or night, doesn't matter what you do, it won't take the pain away. It's there all the time.
Right.
That can destroy your soul, Cynthia.
Well, you've described that perfectly. And the cornea, which is the part of the eye that is operated on in LASIK, has more nerve endings than any other part of the rest of the body. So you can imagine what's that like. And you can imagine, let's say you get a piece of dust in your eye or you scratch your cornea. It's excruciating. And if that never goes away, ever, and you've got it for the rest of your life, that's very depressing.
Yeah. Understatement. Depressing. Understatement. And that's one of your key senses. So another thing that's happened to me recently, God, everything's happening to me. I've had labyrinthitis. You know what labyrinthitis is?
Yes.
You know, where you've had a cold and then afterwards it gets to your middle ear and then everything's dizzy and vertigo and nausea. And at one point it was crippling. I could barely get off the floor. I couldn't even walk.
Right.
And that's what happens, your ears, your eyes, when something goes wrong there, it literally cripples you, doesn't it?
Of course. It's unbearable. And actually, since we wrote the book, there have been 10 more suicides. There have been 40 suicides out of an 8,000 member Facebook group. So that's a lot.
Definitely.
And you are helping to get this scourge out of our lives. I'm very grateful to you.
No, it's the least I can do. It's my pleasure. But Cynthia, let's go back to LASIK surgery. It's been around for 20 odd years plus. The thing is, when I start talking to people about it, recently I've been speaking to family and friends about it, and I know people who've had the surgery. And I say, do you have, are you happy with the surgery? Do you have any problems? They go, yeah, I'm happy. I'm not wearing glasses anymore. But now because I know what I know follow-up questions. So I've said things like, do you have any problems with dry eyes? Oh God, yeah, I've got such dry eyes. What do you do about that? Oh, I have to use eye drops all the time. That's why my eyes are bloodshot. It's not because I'm tired. They're just constantly inflamed. It makes me look angry and upset when I'm not. And I sleep lots. It's just that's the way my eyes look. And then I go, okay, then I ask other people, like, any other things like halos or, glares? Oh God, yeah, I get that, especially at night when I'm driving. It's really difficult. Prefer my partner drives. So the answer always is, yeah, I'm really happy. But then because I'm not wearing glasses anymore. But then as soon as you start scratching the surface, other things start to arise. And then they also say, oh, it's very unlucky. Yeah, it's rare apparently. And I go, how rare do you think it is? And they go, I don't really know. But the clinic said they've done thousands and they hardly have any of these problems. So I guess I'm just unlucky. That rings a bell, doesn't it?
It does. As a matter of fact, 30% of people who have LASIK suffer permanent, life-altering, untreatable complications. That's 30%. And I bet if you ask them, did the doctor warn you about this? I bet the answer would be, oh no, I didn't know that. So
let's go back to LASIK before we start talking about the complications and the rates and the truth and how the FDA are almost complicit with the LASIK eye surgeons and the manufacturers. Let's break it down a bit so that, the people listening, not everyone is medical like you and I. Let's talk about the cornea. So you've got this thin layer of tissue, which has actually got multi-layered different types of stromal layers and stuff, superficial and then more deeper. Can you just break down, what is that? Because normally people just think it's a bit of clear tissue. When you said it's got so many nerves in it, that's kind of surprising, even to someone like me.
well, the cornea is the clear window in front of the eye. And as we said, it's got more nerve endings than any other part of the body. It's got an epithelium, a little layer on the surface, and then an endothelium, which helps pump the water out of it. And during LASIK, the shape of the cornea is shaved and changed by a laser. And when people have eyes that are longer than they should be, the focus doesn't hit right on the eye, so it's blurry and you have to wear glasses in front. If the eyes, that's called being nearsighted. If the eyes are shorter than normal, then again, it's blurry and you wear a pair of glasses or contact lenses to change the focus. But if you shave the cornea with the laser, if you take off layers, first of all, you're cutting all the little precious nerves in that cornea, more nerves than any other part of the body. And then you're changing its shape so it goes up, and then it goes across, and then it goes down. It's not like a clear curve now. It's more like a mesa, up, across, down. So a first-year eye resident in their first month of residency would know this is a terrible idea, cutting the cornea. And it never heals. There's inflammation in those corneas, which you can see on scans for the rest of the person's life.
Yeah. So when you said most number of nerves, why are there so many nerves in that cornea? Like, you wouldn't think it would have to be innervated with so many nerves. Why?
Well, one thing the nerves do actually is they keep the eye healthy. Without the nerves, the other cells don't function as well. Secondly, it's an adaptation where you have to be able to blink your eye real fast if something's coming at it. So if there's a puff or air or something, your instinct is to blink. So they're crucial. And what a great photograph you have. That's excellent. Wonderful.
So what it's showing at the top is, right, the outer surface is superficial epithelium, and you've got nerves going all the way there.
Right,
and you've got your basal epithelium, subbasal epithelium with the neural plexus. Then you've got the Bowman's layer, and then you've got the anterior midstroma, and then you've got your midstroma. You've got these big trunks of nerves crisscrossing. And what this goes to show is that I think, there's no way you can cut, incise, or laser through the cornea without hitting the nerves. It's impossible.
Absolutely. Every single square millimeter of the cornea is chock full of nerves.
Now, the thing is, the idea of operating on the front of the eye and cutting bits of the cornea aren't new, are they? People have been trying to slice and dice the cornea for literally centuries, am I right?
Well, you've done your homework. Not centuries, but for 50 years.
Hi, beautiful people. Guys, I just want you to close your eyes for a second and imagine this. Rolling green hills and open, beautiful countryside instead of ugly 5G towers. Deep, soul-nourishing conversations instead of empty small talk. People who get you, who think you're interesting and thoughtful and funny, not some crazy conspiracy theorist. Meals that are made with love, nourishing, organic, and actually delicious instead of the usual processed, convenient garbage. Real connection, real laughter, real healing. New lifelong friends. And maybe for the very first time in a long time, the feeling of truly belonging to something. And yeah, instead of arguing with someone who listens to Jeremy Vine, you're going to be chilling with me, Doc Malik. No offense to Jeremy. Well, kind of, sort of. Look, folks, I'm not talking about a yoga class in a hotel basement or a Liberal Democrat conference. This is the Doc Malik summer retreat I'm talking about. So if your soul is whispering to you right now that I need this, then you know what? Do what I always say, which is trust your gut instinct and book your place. And you won't regret it. I promise you. Love, Doc Malik. If you would like to read more about the retreat and where to book, go to docmalik.com/retreats, RETREATS / and you can see details of the summer retreat on the website and book there. Thank you so much, folks. Back to the podcast. So where we had left off was, I said the idea of operating the cornea is not unusual. And you said, actually, it's not gone that far back. And you're mentioning Mr. Fyodorov, a Russian ophthalmologist in the 1970s. What I didn't get to say was actually the first time someone operated in the cornea was a German chap, Baron Karl Ferdinand von Graf, in the early 19th century. He was making those keratotomies, trying to treat astigmatism. But anyway, you were saying something really important about how you were present the day LASIK was kind of like born. Can you just go over that one more time, please?
I was working in the Edward S. Harkness Eye Institute of Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center in New York City. And all of a sudden, into my room rushed Steve Troquel. He was a colleague of mine, and I liked him. He wasn't a cornea specialist, but he'd made genuine contributions in the field of surgery of the orbit. And he shoved a piece of paper in my hand. And I looked at it, and it was an electron micrograph photo of the cornea with an exact rectangle cut out of it with an excimer laser. And he said, "This will revolutionize ophthalmology." And I thought to myself, it will revolutionize nothing. This is a horrible idea. There's going to be pain. There's going to be thinning of the cornea. It's going to be weak. It'll heal by scarring. It's going to be a disaster. So I predicted it would never be a success. I was absolutely right about the complications, but I was wrong that it wouldn't be a success. It's been performed on 40 million people worldwide, 20 million of them in the US. And the complication rate is 30%. 30%. That means all around the world, in all the developed countries, there are people with life-altering, permanent, untreatable complications. This is a huge public health hazard.
Yeah, and I think the case of LASIK, what it highlights is the problems in the field of medicine, the hubris of the medical profession, the corruption and the greed that can affect certain people, the way marketing is used to basically negate proper informed consent, the capture of the regulatory bodies that are meant to be protecting the public and, patients, and how actually they're just enabling the bad stuff to happen. And then the cover-up and the gaslighting. And also how doctors close ranks. And like you mentioned in the book, or maybe one of your colleagues did, because I know there's several authors, there's that element of the guild, you can't speak out. Can't speak out about your fellow brethren and colleagues. Otherwise, if you do, you'll get ostracized and, you just can't call out your own shit. You have to just cover it up and pretend it never happened. There's so many layers, aren't there? So many layers
Yes.
to this LASIK business.
Well, you've described the situation very eloquently, and it happened to me. I arranged for, 10 years ago, an article to be published in the New York Times on the danger of LASIK. And I was quoted in the article. And it was front page. The little blurb to the article was right there on the front page. And I went to a meeting of research ophthalmologists that same night, and nobody would talk to me. And 3 people wrote letters of complaint to the president. And they commonly would say, well, you're not a cornea specialist. What do you know? You don't need to be a cornea specialist. As I say, you could be a first-year eye resident and you'd know this is a terrible idea. So,
Yeah, and let's just in case people haven't got to the point where they've read the show notes, you're not some quackadoodle-doo doctor. You're, former professor of eye surgery from Columbia University Med School. Am I right?
yes, clinical professor of ophthalmology, Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons. I'm retired from active practice, but I'm continuing to work to get the truth out about LASIK.
Well, I think you and I have got that in common, that we're both ethical surgeons and ethical
Right.
doctors, and we care about our patients. In the book it says, don't have eye surgery unless you really, really need it. I used to be the same. I'd be like, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I'd be like, don't have an operation unless you really, really need it.
Right.
If it comes down to cosmetic or whatever, don't do it. I'm not a cosmetic surgeon. You want a cosmetic operation? Go see someone else. Go see a different surgeon, a different podiatrist or whatever. In the UK, podiatrists do a lot of the cosmetic surgery. And one of the things that I was taught as an orthopedic surgeon was we don't do cosmetic surgery. We only fix broken feet, not normal feet. And that comes back to another thing. I just want to check, because some people might argue this doesn't make sense. So a lot of people who go for LASIK eye surgery feel their eyes are broken. They can't see properly. Now you keep saying, don't have eye surgery on healthy eyes. LASIK surgery makes healthy eyes sick. Many would argue they were already unhealthy. They couldn't see. Why do you say they're still healthy eyes, even though their eyesight is poor?
Because they can be fixed with a pair of glasses. The problem can be fixed with a pair of glasses or contact lenses. You don't have to use surgery. That's the cheapest, by far the least dangerous, and the most effective way of fixing it. And in the old days, when people were nearsighted, they were the brains. They stayed back in the village and did the thinking while the farsighted people went out and hunted the woolly mammoths or whatever they were hunting. So nearsightedness isn't a disease. It's an alternate condition of the eye. And one of the things the doctors that do LASIK will tell you today is they have a miraculous new technique called, let's say, SMILE. SMILE is a procedure where you go through the middle of the cornea and you slice out a lenticle and pull it out instead of going in from the top. nonsense. Anytime you cut the cornea of the eye, no matter how good the surgeon is, no matter how fancy the laser is, no matter where in the cornea the reshaping takes place, it will cause the same problems. Severing the nerves, chronic inflammation. You can't get away with it. Distorted vision, problems with glare at night, and pain. You can't get away from these problems.
And when we talk about LASIK eye surgery and the cornea, I'm going to show another picture. So if you're listening, guys, good idea to watch the video. What they do is they literally create a flap, don't they? So they put anesthetic and then they lift a flap. So they first of all cut a flap and then they can bombard the lasers, burn away literally a layer of that tissue, one of the layers that we showed before. You know that layer that I showed you, the layers, the epithelium and everything. What layer do they take away, by the way?
They take away the stroma. They have to go through the epithelium. And there's actually two different types of LASIK. There's LASIK with a flap, which is what is usually done today. And then there's LASIK without a flap. And in that, they just scrape the epithelium off and then let it grow back. But imagine how your eye feels if all the corneal epithelium is scraped off.
Is that PRK?
Yes.
Yeah.
PRK. It was the first type of LASIK that was approved by the FDA. And as those are excellent pictures, I love the photographs. And it shows beautifully that the cornea is now flattened in the center part.
Yeah.
Not in the periphery. That means when the pupil dilates, the black hole in the center is the pupil. When the pupil dilates, you have access to the peripheral part of the cornea, which is a totally different curve from the center of the cornea. So you're going to have, inevitably, in dim light, you're going to have two different focuses to the eye. There'll be the focus in the center part, the reshaped part, which focuses right on the retina. And then you'll have the peripheral part, which is focused in the old way that it was focusing to begin with. So 100% of the time, you will have difficulty in dim light, 100%. And think of this. We're driving down roads and the cars coming at us are driven by people who've had LASIK. And they can't see. We're flying in airplanes where the pilot has had LASIK and can't see.
Wow.
It's a big public health problem.
It
and
is.
do you know the story of Pat Tillerson? Did you ever hear about him?
No, who's that?
He was a very fine young man. He was a football player, very spectacular career, and he left and went to Afghanistan because he felt he had to defend his country. And while he was there, he was shot by one of his own men, killed by a man who just had LASIK and couldn't see who it was. He was walking towards his troops with his hand up, and this one man couldn't see and shot him.
Oh, God.
So think of that when you're driving at night down a road.
Yeah. And this is what the flap dislocation looks like. So when they peel off a layer of the flap to get to the deeper layers of the cornea to buzz away, they then put the flap back. And that's now contingent on it healing. Now, the reason why it's so clear, the cornea, is because there's no blood vessels running through it. You get the blood, nutrients coming through, I guess, through diffusion and tiny, tiny blood vessels, really, really small. But healing will be very slow and delayed. And I read in the book that these flaps, they never heal back fully, normally, and they're always in a weak area and they can always be dislodged. Am I right?
Well, Dr. Malik, you've really done your homework. You've got beautiful illustrations of the problem. Yes, the flap is only attached with the strength of a contact lens on the eye.
Wow.
And if you rub your eye, if it itches, or if a wave hits you, or if you're in contact sports or something, and your eye gets hit, the flap will dislocate. And then the eye goes instantly blind. The flap has to be positioned as quickly as possible. And now it's much more likely to dislocate again. And it's amazing to me that the LASIK surgeons haven't warned their patients about this. They haven't told them to wear protective lenses when they play contact sports. And don't rub their eyes. And I'm the one that does it. It's unbelievable to me that would be so.
Well, there's probably two reasons why, Cynthia, and I don't know what goes through their heads, and it might be even different reasons that I've not thought of. Who knows what goes through other people's minds? I'm not a mind reader, but I would assume that one is there's a financial element, that if you want people to do the procedure that you believe in, then basically, and you want to make money from it, and I've heard surgeons and the nurses tell me that this is an operation that's done literally within minutes, and they charge a fortune for it. Most of it is not insured, it's self-pay. So this is big bucks money. And I remember going into the private hospital, and the guys with the big fancy cars and sports cars were all eye surgeons. You want business, and if you want business, you don't highlight things that can go wrong. You don't talk about the negative stuff. That's a bit silly. You don't tell people that kind of stuff. You tell them all the good stuff. And if there's bad stuff, you will tell them it's very rare, or you tell them it's their fault, or you tell them that it'll go away. Hopefully enough times until the patient goes away, if not the problem. But it might also be ideological. A lot of people just ideologically, these surgeons might genuinely believe that they're doing amazing work. They get feedback from their patients saying, "You've cured me of my glasses. My eyesight's amazing. I'm wonderful." And so they believe it. They genuinely believe what they're doing is fantastic and wonderful, and that anybody that comes along with a complaint is an anomaly and a 1 in a million. What do you think?
Well, I can't put myself in the mind of the LASIK surgeons.
Yeah.
But they don't give the percentages. You got consent from every one of your patients, and you had an obligation to explain the complications, the alternate therapies, the risks, and the benefits. And the consent form of the LASIK surgeons doesn't give the percentages. For example, a paper just in 2024 showed that the risk of dry eye after LASIK is 75%. So if you're reading a consent form and it says the risk of dry eye, where your eyes will feel as if there's sand under your lids and they'll burn, is 75%. That's very different from a consent form that says there is a risk of a slightly dry eye after the surgery, but they don't have the percentages, and they don't say it's permanent. It'll last the rest of your life. So that has to be put in the consent form, and it isn't. The FDA at one point was going to require surgeons to use an amended consent form that did explain the complications in clear language that a layman can understand and with the percentages attached. But that has not happened. So,
Well, I agree. And it is about the numbers. And so I spoke to a family member of mine and said, "Are you happy with your LASIK surgery?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, what about your dry eyes? Yeah, I really don't like that. And I said, if they had told you the risk of dry eyes was 1 in 100, would you have had the operation? And to my surprise, she said no. I said, hold on. Even if it's as low as 1 in 100, you wouldn't have the eye surgery. You just told me it's successful. She goes, no, I wouldn't have the surgery. No, 1 in 100 is a lot. My eyes are, I said, okay, what about 1 in 1,000? And she went, I don't think so. I was told that this is like 1 in 10,000, 1 in 50,000. So if it's all about how you ask the questions. If you ask the questions, are you happy with the eye surgery? And everybody says yes. Well, then you can say it's a great operation. But I then asked a few more questions, and my family member told me they wouldn't have the eye surgery because of their dry eyes. And the risk was 1 in 100. They said they wouldn't have the surgery. Even if it's 1 in 1,000, they wouldn't have the surgery. So when you say it's important to put the numbers to things, I think you're absolutely right. Because if you don't, that's not informed consent. Because, it's just all misleading as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you've really done your homework. I'm very impressed. You're a great interviewer. Yes, that's true. And I think these people have paid, in the US, it's about $2,000 an eye. And the LASIK surgeons usually give a discount for the second eye. They try to do both eyes at once. Therefore, somebody who's paid all that money to have their eyes done, they didn't do their homework. And I don't think they feel probably very good about the decision they made, but they're defended against that. They don't want to admit they made a mistake. That's my guess. I mean, who knows what goes on in another person's mind, as you've said so well.
Well, about that bilateral eye surgery, I think that's such a breach of medical ethics and good medical practice. Because traditionally, eye surgeons operate on one eye at a time. Because if, God forbid, something goes wrong with an eye operation, at least you have the other eye and the sight hopefully intact. If you do both eyes, and God forbid there's a complication, and am I right, Cynthia?
Yes.
There's no such thing as a 100% guaranteed safe operation, is there?
Well, the closest we come to it is probably cataract surgery these days, which has a complication rate of about 0.1%. And the chance of losing an eye altogether is vanishingly small. But in LASIK, where the complication rate of a severe life-altering complication is 30%, 1 out of 3, that's something no one would do. Your eyes are what you use to see the world. They're useful.
Isn't one of the... So, I mean, there's a financial element to get your eye operation double, 2 in one go. I think they want to get you captured. But the other thing as well is if you have one eye done, you can compare with your intact eye. You can tell, hey, why am I getting halos? Why does this hurt? So now you might have hesitancy. Now you might have questions. So to avoid that, just operate on both eyes at the same time. There's nothing to compare with. There's no placebo arm.
Yeah, I've seen a number of LASIK damaged patients in my office, and it's a very distressing sight to see these people. Oh, my doctor, he betrayed me. He told me nothing could happen. He never warned me about this. But the people who are really annoyed are the ones who've had only one eye done, because they can see how bad their vision is. And even though they're able to read close to 20/20 on the R chart in my office with black letters with strict edges against a white background, they're not seeing right, and they know it. 100% of patients after LASIK lose contrast sensitivity, which is the ability to distinguish between subtle shades of gray, 100%. And contrast sensitivity is probably not that high on people's lists, but this operation has 100% complication rate in the sense that the eye will not work as well as it did before.
Oh, man. All right. Well, and then there's other things. So not everyone who has the surgery can be guaranteed that the results will last. So it's funny how the medical world uses words to cover up and fluff. So when the operation fails, when the problem comes back, instead of saying, "Oh, sorry, the operation hasn't worked," they say there's regression. It's, regression is just such a nice word, isn't it? You don't even know what it means. You just tell it, "Oh, yes, that's regression." So instead of saying to the patient, "Oh, yeah, that's because the operation is not working anymore. Sorry, we've messed up. The cornea's thinned out and blah, blah, blah." It's regression. Isn't that lovely? I don't know about you, but if someone said that to me, I'd be like, "What the fuck does that mean?" Regression? Like, what? How have I regressed? And then instead of saying, "Oh shit, we need to do this all over again. We need to revise this complication." Then you say, "Oh, you need an enhancement." Like, what? Like, what?
Very well said. Yes, well, actually, consumer reports, I don't know if you have that in the UK, but we have it here, did a study that found that after LASIK, 70% of people were back in glasses, either distance or near, both. 70%.
At what point? How far out?
I don't think they specified in that particular study, but after 7 to 8 years, there was a paper last year that came out, 44% of people are no longer able to read the 20/20 line without glasses. In other words, 44% have regressed. And if you do have repeat surgery for the regression, you are going to have a lot more complications. The flap will be even less strongly attached to the base. And it's much more likely that little infective organisms can get in, or that even cells from the cornea can sneak in under the flap and start to grow and destroy vision. So it's...
You can get ectasia as well, because this repeated thinning of the cornea will result in the eye bulging out, won't it?
Right. Ectasia is actually kind of like a hernia. The weak part of the cornea starts to bulge out as if there was a weak spot in a tire, say. It would bulge out. That's a real problem because the vision is very distorted then. And you can't really successfully do a corneal transplant because, remember, the cornea is now chronically inflamed. Chronically inflamed. You do a scan of the eye, there are all those white blood cells in there. And if there's inflammation in the cornea, the flap has a very high chance of failing. Not the flap, the new piece of cornea that's been put in. So ectasia is basically only treated with these scleral contact lenses, these very uncomfortable contact lenses that do reshape the abnormally shaped cornea. That's the only possible treatment, and it can make you functional, but it can never give you back what you had.
Oh, man. So just a recap in terms of complications. We've got dry eyes. We've got glares, halos, and starburst. We've got undercorrection, overcorrection, visual fluctuations, so-called regression, which just basically means your eyes are going back to where they were at the beginning, infection, inflammation, flap complications like it not healing, or dislocation, wrinkles, ectasia, and just gradual loss of your correction. Am I correct?
You've forgotten a few.
All right, fill me in.
The risk of retinal detachment is 60 times greater.
Oh, wow.
Because you're taking the eye and you're squashing it to do the flap. And that means that you're stretching the retina out and you're going to be tearing it and weakening it out in the periphery. 60 times more likely to have a retinal detachment. Plus, when you flatten the eye and the pressure goes up to 70, when normal is 8 to 22, then you're stressing everything back there. They've been strokes of the optic nerve. There have been hemorrhages into the macula. There have been other little hemorrhages all over in the retina. All that's been described in the literature. And actually, in the back of the LASIK book, we've got 11 pages containing 150 citations from the scientific literature.
Yeah, I've seen that.
158. So every statement I'm making today on this program is backed up by a peer-reviewed study.
Right. Let's talk about the FDA. How did they get captured in all of this? Why are they not doing their job? Why are they licensing these LASIK machines and lasers, some of which that have literally been made in the garages of these eye surgeons? What the hell is going on here?
Well, you read the book very carefully, and the story is all told in the LASIK book. And Morris tells that story, Morris Waxler.
Yeah.
He PhD. He was chairman of the committee of the FDA that approved LASIK. And what happened was he insisted that they follow the patients for a year. They just wanted to show the immediate complications. But he made them follow the patients for a year. And after he retired as head of the FDA, he went back because he was seeing all these LASIK damaged patients. Where did they come from? How come all of a sudden this very safe procedure is producing all these very unhappy, suicidal, or dead from suicide people? And he looked at the original statistics that the LASIK surgeons gave the committee, and he found after a year all the complications we've discussed today, the glare and the halo and the dazzle and the fluctuating vision and the pain and the halos around lights at night. So the original data from the original study showed it was a dangerous procedure. We've gone back, Morris and I have gone back to the FDA twice, 2011, 2018. And Morris has sent them a citizen's petition around 2011. And you can find it. Just Google Waxler FDA petition. Petitioning the FDA to put a halt to this procedure because now the complications are coming out, but they won't act. As a matter of fact, I have a photograph in the book.
Well, it's not just that. They've actually denied the petition, as far as I'm concerned, haven't they?
They haven't acted on it.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, it looked like they might. They were talking about maybe requiring a consent form that did talk about the complications must be given to the patients. When I testified the second time, I gave them a consent form that I'd written myself. It's there in the book. But they haven't acted.
Why do you think that is?
I don't want to put words in their mouth. I don't know. It's unbelievable. It's a huge, they're supposed to be protecting the public, and they're not.
Okay, and what about your medical colleagues? What about your eye surgeon colleagues? What do they think of you? Do they think of you as a troublemaker? Do
Yes.
they think that you're disgruntled, you're jealous of their private practices, that you're just missed out on the gold rush, and that, you know, you're just a quack and a troublemaker? Where do you sit in all this?
Well, I'm, again, not going to put words in their mouth, but I do have two good friends who are both excellent surgeons. One took a cataract out of my right eye. The other was one of the first people to do LASIK ever. He's a cornea specialist, and neither of them does LASIK now. And I asked the doctor who operated on my right eye why he didn't do LASIK, and he said, well, if something goes wrong, you can't fix it. There's a whole mess of ophthalmologists who feel the way I do. And I've talked to them. They're two very eminent ophthalmologists. One is in Miami at Bascom Palmer. The other is at the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary in Boston. All they do all day long is see damaged LASIK patients and try and help them in some small way. And I asked both of them, would you give me a quote for the book? Would you perhaps say the consent process needs to be improved? People need to be more aware of the possible problems. And they neither would speak out. The ophthalmologist won't speak out.
Why?
Oh, I don't know. You ask them. I don't know. I mean, look, I don't get any money from speaking out against LASIK. In fact, it costs me money and time. And 100% of the profits from this book are going to help LASIK damaged patients. 100%. And we've made it available as an ebook for 99 cents on Amazon, just so people who are poor can have a chance to read it. And believe me, LASIK patients are poor. Many of them are disabled. They're in a very bad state. They can't work. And it's not, believe me, this is nothing that's gaining me anything, but I simply have to do it. I wish I had some company among other ophthalmologists, but I don't.
Well, that's really sad. It's really sad. So Cynthia, I don't know where your stance is on what I'm going to say next, and you don't really need to say it, but I want you to hear me out. Unfortunately, what you've described with LASIK and the way you've been treated and the way the medical profession has behaved is not unusual. And I think it's an indication of how lost we are as a medical profession. We've really lost our way. And we don't deserve the trust and the respect from patients anymore, because certainly here in the UK, everything is protocol and guideline driven. It has stripped away a doctor's autonomy to treat the patient as a unique individual in front of them. They have to follow the rules and the guidelines and policies, which are now centrally dictated at a national level with heavily influenced people who are beholden to big pharma and corporations, have massive conflicts of interest. And now a low-level doctor who steps out of line and says or does something that's actually in the patient's interest that goes against the guideline or the policy can now face severe censure and have an investigation, have their license suspended, registration taken away, and have their career trashed. So now, when I was a junior doctor, it was all about first do no harm to the patient. And that did not come with conditions. It was very simple. You do no harm to your patient. And in what you're describing, the eye surgery, like you said, you've got a healthy eye. You just put glasses on or contact lenses and it worked fine. Don't do something to these healthy eyes that could do harm, especially 30% complication rate. That's a complete breach of first do no harm. But now, I'm afraid, Cynthia, and I'm sure it's the same in America and Australia and everywhere, because all the licensing boards, I don't know if you know this, FSMB and everything, USMLE, everything comes out of Texas, and now they've got an international arm, and they regulate all the licensing boards, whether it's in Zimbabwe or the General Medical Council in the UK or anything. Basically now, first do no harm means first do no harm to my registration and license. First do no harm to my mortgage. First do no harm to my career. First do no harm to my holidays and my private schooling for my kids. First do no harm to my mistress. First do no harm to my sports car. First do no harm to all of that shit. And then somewhere down the line will be first do no harm to my patient as long as I'm following the guidelines and protocols. This is the problem, Cynthia.
Well, that's very fiery, very impassioned, and very impressive. You obviously have a deep commitment to this. And we've all taken the Hippocratic Oath. And maybe in some cases it's a hypocritical oath. And I just don't understand. I don't understand why other ophthalmologists who won't do it on themselves, who won't do it for their families, who won't do it to any of their patients. And you've got to stop rubbing your eyes, Dr. Malik.
Yeah, I know. I've not had LASIK, so don't worry about that.
I'm glad you haven't. You wouldn't be giving this interview.
God, no.
You'd be in too much pain. You'd be in a dark room crying. But, they are doing their bit on a very low level. They're talking their patients out of it. They're saying, I wouldn't advise it for you. But they're not speaking out. And this truth needs to be told. And I'm so grateful to you that you're taking this on. It's wonderful.
So the thing about they're not talking to anybody is exactly what I just told you. That's why. Their fear of letting down the guild, their fear of the repercussions, the investigations, the complaints, the suspensions, the fear of what it will do to their career. Everyone is living in fear now. And when you talked about with LASIK, the lack of informed consent, the money influence, the power and the few people at the top driving this, the FDA not doing its job. I'm sorry, I see parallels with COVID and the experimental vaccine. There was no informed consent. It was not a normal vaccine. It was mRNA tech, which is now openly admitted that, yes, it's genetic technology. There was no informed consent. The placebo arm was given the vaccine after just a few months. There's no long-term comparison. Both eyes were operated on. You can't tell what the healthy cohort is like and what's not. It's been injected mass, billions around the world. Now harms are being seen. No one really wants to talk about it. I have doctors come up to me and go, you're right to talk about this. You're very brave. I see these problems every day in my clinic. Neurologists telling me about all the stuff they're seeing. Cardiologists talking about the unusual clots that they're seeing. It just goes on and on. But then when I say to them, why don't you say something then? They go, oh God, no, I can't say anything. I'll get into trouble. No, I don't want to say anything. Look what's happened to you, doc. I can't. I've got a mortgage. I've got kids. And I go, you think I don't have a mortgage and young kids? So whether it's LASIK surgery or a dodgy metal hip replacement or whether it's COVID shots, I'm afraid doctors have got a habit of going along to get along, not really speaking up and defending their patients, forgetting what true informed consent actually means. So, your risk of COVID was 0.00001%. No one was told that. What they were told was it was a deadly disease, and to save Granny, you needed to take the shot. But were you told about the risks of the shot, that it wasn't tried, that there was never any successful mRNA technology ever used, ever, that they were all failed, and they had oncogenic properties, toxicity problems, and it was actually used as a cancer treatment, even that not successfully? Was anybody told this when they rolled up their arm and took the shot? I don't think so. And so it goes on and on. There's a problem, I think, fundamentally in medicine. It's not just amongst your eye surgeon colleagues. It's amongst all of us. I think the problem is we have hubris, we are arrogant, we are indoctrinated through medical school rather than educated. We are pigeonholed into super specialized areas, and we then delegate and abdicate responsibility for other areas to other specialists. So we all think we're all brilliant at what we do, but we never see the whole. And I saw this 7 years ago because 7 years ago, I reversed my diabetes, I reversed my hypertension, I lost weight, I got healthy. And Cynthia, none of it was through anything I learned in med school. And that was what surprised me. I was like, wow. And one of the big turning points was when my diabetologist, who himself had diabetes and was munching away on a donut, was telling me, yeah, I need to take metformin. And I walked away from the clinic thinking, why the hell am I taking advice from him? How did I get to this point in my life where a fat doctor eating donuts with diabetes is telling me how to treat my diabetes with a tablet? A pill for every ill. We don't actually know what it means to be healthy or how to be healthy. All we know is how to dispense drugs, injections, and operations, and feed big pharma and the system, the beast system. Most doctors I know aren't even healthy. We really have lost our way, don't you think?
Well, I think that in the United States, the big problem with our health system, we spend twice as much as other countries, and we have much worse measures. The problem is we're spending 2/3 of our health budget on surgery and pills, and 1/3 on preventive services. And you do a better job in the UK. You're only spending 1/3 on the pills and procedures, and 2/3.
Oh no, we're catching up with you. Don't worry, we're trying very hard.
And it's mainly because with the lack of government funding now, the pharmacological companies are funding our research. So it's a very expensive problem that has a very simple answer. So,
what's the answer?
The answer is keep the people healthy through preventive measures, not through a lot of pills that have questionable value or questionable success. We're a long way from the simple country doctor that knew how to treat the patients in a very simple way.
Absolutely. So every discipline of medicine I come across, they all have their own LASIK surgery and more. Whether it's statins and the evil that statins do, whether it's SSRIs amongst the psychiatric folk and the damage that they cause and the PSSD and whatnot. I mean, it doesn't matter. You pick any speciality and there's riddled with problems and corruption and all the problems that you've just described, gaslighting the patients, corruption, conflicts of interest, big money, your celebrity doctors promoting a certain thing, going to the conferences, getting the adulation and respect. Because I'm sure the LASIK eye surgeons are like swanning around saying, look at us, look how successful we are. We've got massive private practices. we're doing so well. We must be doing a great job. You poor other eye surgeons need to catch up with us. You know, it's every specialty has this problem, I'm afraid. But I think it all starts with individual doctors remembering the Hippocratic Oath and the medical ethics, informed consent, do no harm, first do no harm, and respecting bodily autonomy, and not thinking about their bank balance and their career and whatnot. And that's where we need more Cynthias to have the courage to step up and say, this isn't right. So let's go back to very quickly, and then we'll wrap up. You were a retinal surgeon.
Yes.
I've had a problem. I've had a colleague who had a problem with his eyes, and he said there's something at the back of his retina. He had some bleeds. Now he's been told he has to go and have an injection every month. I've forgotten what the name of that injection is. Does that sound normal to you, to have an injection every month?
Well, I can tell you that's been an absolute lifesaver. You're talking about wet macular degeneration, which is the number one cause of blindness in people over 65 in the US.
Okay.
And what happens is new blood vessels grow up underneath the retina, and they're abnormal, and they break and they bleed, and they can blind an eye if you sneeze.
Wow.
And we now have an injection of a drug that destroys those abnormal vessels. Avastin is one example. And it is saving the sight of millions of people around the world. So it's a good drug. We do have something to treat wet macular degeneration with. We don't have a way of treating dry macular degeneration now, although there are many trials in progress. But I agree, it does sound horrible that this poor person is getting shots into their eye. But there's a very, very, very low risk of complications. And to save sight, it's certainly worth it. That's not one of the bad treatments.
Okay. And that's the thing. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, when I was an ankle surgeon, there were fractures that definitely benefited from intervention. Now, 95% of broken ankles I could treat non-operatively. I would tell the patients they need to be casted, booted, partial weight bearing, blah, blah, blah. But there were some that really could do with an operation. And if I didn't operate on them, that person was crippled for life. And that's the thing, you know, yes, there's a lot of bad medicine out there and bad surgery, but there's also a lot of good. And it's holding on to the good stuff and hopefully getting rid of the bad stuff, isn't it?
Well, I do believe that most doctors are truly trying to do good. And perhaps the ones that are not doing good are just deluded themselves in some way. I mean, you've always got to keep up on the latest, and you've got to read the literature. And the LASIK surgeons just need to read their own literature and tell the patients what's going on in their own literature. But most doctors do, I believe, want to do good. I don't believe this.
I think so too. I think so too. But you know, one of the things that I wish that we had been taught in medicine, in med school, and I think part of the problem is the Rockefeller system of medicine, which is now worldwide. It is just driving people towards drugs. It stripped away all kinds of herbal medicine, traditional medicine, acupuncture, homeopathy, everything. It's just focused on pills and operations. I mean, doctors for centuries have been doing stuff that if you look back in hindsight, we go, what the hell is that all about? Whether it's, you know, severe bloodletting, you know, whether it's arsenic therapy, mercury, you know, cocaine, trepanning, sticking needles up the nose and scrambling your brains, lobotomies. I mean, the guy who invented the lobotomy won a Nobel Prize for that. I mean, you wouldn't be getting a Nobel Prize for that today. So what I'm trying to say is medical history is littered with doctors thinking they're doing good, when actually we've been doing quite the opposite. And it's just taking a while for us to realize and go, oh shit. And instead of, what would have been nice is if in med school, that would have been the first lecture, which is, hey folks, we've done some dumb shit over the years. And the lesson learned is that we might be doing some dumb shit today. And we need to be vigilant of that and have the humility to recognize we don't always get it right, and to look for things today that we're doing, which tomorrow we'll be going, oh my goodness, what were we up to? Instead, my first lecture was, you are the top 1% of society. You're the cleverest. You're the best. You can't do any wrong. Do you see the difference?
Well, the bottom line is you've always got to follow the literature. You've got to have studies, hopefully controlled studies, where the control does less well than the subject, the person who received the drug. For example, in the eye, diabetics used to all go blind if they got something called proliferative retinopathy. When the argon laser came in, almost all of them keep their sight. And there was a prospective randomized controlled study that showed that. So we know when we laser, when we use the argon laser in the eye of a diabetic with proliferative retinopathy, we know from a study that that is a good thing. But the problem with LASIK is the studies themselves, the original studies showed it wasn't a good thing. And the FDA approved it anyway. And Morris Waxler feels very strongly about that. He feels he has a personal duty to tell the truth about LASIK because he feels he has unleashed a lot of misery on the world. And I really applaud him for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I slightly disagree with you about the literature business. There's a couple of prominent editors, I've forgotten their names, one of the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the BMJ, who said that 80% of scientific literature can't be reproduced and is complete garbage. I think there's so many conflicts of interest. It's controlled by big pharma. The raw data is never accessible. And I think a lot of research is just very questionable. And it takes a while to turn the boat around and for people to see that. And there's things like in orthopedic surgery as well that's been littered. Things come in fads. And, you know, it's years later that people realize the research was flawed and not good. I think one of the most important things is critical thinking. Question everything. Just question everything. And just abide by the simple medical ethics that, you know, have developed over centuries for a reason, to protect patients from us, doctors. That's why medical ethics are there. Because they know doctors can be dangerous. Doctors, in their desire to do good, can cause more harm. And that's, I think that's where we need to focus on, medical ethics. Anyway, final wrap up. And my final question is going to be, on your deathbed, when you meet your maker, you know, just before you meet your maker, what words of wisdom and advice would you give to your loved ones? But before you answer that question, why would you recommend people think twice before having LASIK surgery? Just summarize all the points again.
Because it's an incredibly risky, dangerous operation that could leave you blinded, and it's much easier to wear a pair of glasses.
All right. Well, that's a nice, succinct version of that. So tell me, what would you say to your loved ones on your deathbed?
About LASIK or about what?
About life. What words of wisdom would you want to impart on them before you pass on?
Well, I would say that in a way I've been lucky. I've found a cause that is really, truly important. It's important that people not go blind, that people not be disabled. And in ways, I feel I'm lucky to have had this in my life, that there's something that I can really believe in. Of course, the poor people who've had LASIK um, are unlucky. But I would say if you have a goal in life that you can work towards, it makes your life worthwhile.
Excellent. Something more than just yourself.
Yes,
Absolutely.
and you're doing that. You're doing that. I mean, I applaud you for that. That's what you're doing, is helping people. And that's what life's all about.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you very much.
Well, you're entirely welcome. It's been a privilege to be on, and thank you for helping us to get our very important message out.
I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts, and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations, and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence, and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and/or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.